Lucas was no stranger to the shadows that stretched across the city streets at night. He had grown up in their cold embrace, watching the world from alleys and cracked sidewalks, where hope seemed as distant as the stars hidden behind the city smog. At just 24, he was already marked, a name whispered quietly among those who dealt in secrets and debts. But tonight, something was different. The rain fell heavy, slicking the pavement as Lucas lit a cigarette under a flickering street lamp. He exhaled a long plume of smoke, eyes scanning the deserted street. A black car rolled slowly to a stop nearby, its tires hissing against the wet asphalt. Two men stepped out, their suits sharp, faces unreadable beneath the shadows of their hats. "You Lucas?" one asked, voice low and calm. Lucas nodded cautiously, sensing the weight behind the simple question. They didn't waste time. The men explained who they were. Emissaries of the city's most notorious gang, a shadow government that controlled everything from underground fights to corrupt politicians. They came with an offer, an opportunity that could change Lucas's life forever. A partnership, power, money beyond his wildest dreams. But it came with strings. Loyalty, obedience, actions that would stain his hands with blood. Lucas felt the old familiar tug in his chest, the hunger for a better life clashing with the echoes of the promises he made to his mother years ago. She had begged him to stay clean, to find a way out of the mess that swallowed so many. But here he was, standing on the edge of that abyss again. He looked the men in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "No." Silence. One of the men smiled thinly. "You don't understand what refusing means." Lucas did. He turned his back to them and walked away. That night, the city seemed to hold its breath. Because refusing the deal was not just a rejection, it was a challenge. And Lucas had just lit a fire that wouldn't go out. Lucas barely slept that night. Every creak of the old floorboards, every distant siren, felt like a warning shot. His mind raced through every possible route, every hidden corner he'd ever known in the city. The rain had washed the streets clean, but it couldn't wash away the feeling of eyes watching him, waiting for him to slip. He knew the cost of saying no. His phone vibrated once, a message from Malik, his oldest friend. "Be careful. They're already looking." The simple word sent a chill down Lucas's spine. The gang's message was clear. Walking away from the deal was a death sentence. It didn't take long to see the aftermath. First, the phone calls. Threats whispered through static. Then, the disappearances. One by one, his childhood friends vanished. Some never seen again. Others found in alleys. Bodies brutalized beyond recognition. Graffiti appeared overnight on the walls near his old neighborhood. Red snakes coiled around broken chains. A sinister reminder. No loyalty means no mercy. Lucas's small apartment felt like a cage. The walls closed in as he packed only what he could carry, the weight of every decision heavier than the bag on his back. He said goodbye to his mother with a forced smile, careful not to let the fear show. She begged him to stay, but he knew the only way to keep her safe was to disappear. He moved fast, slipping through the city's forgotten veins, subway tunnels, abandoned factories, the underbelly of the metropolis where the light barely reached. Old contacts offered brief shelter, wary eyes never leaving him. Every face seemed like a threat, every shadow a hunter. But the police were beginning to notice. Detective Ramirez had been tracking the gang for years, piecing together fragments of violence, corruption, and fear. When reports of missing youths linked back to Lucas's circle surfaced, Ramirez saw an opportunity, a chance to take down the syndicate from the inside. Ramirez's investigation was methodical. He questioned neighbors, traced financial records, and hacked encrypted messages. Slowly, the web tightened. Lucas, however, was a ghost. He changed his appearance, shaved his head, swapped his clothes, and memorized every safe spot. But nothing could erase the memory of betrayal. One night, as Lucas rested in a dingy motel on the outskirts, his phone buzzed again. A video message. Grainy footage of his closest friend, bloodied and chained in a dark room, eyes wide with terror. A voice spoke, distorted and cruel. "This is what happens to those who run. Next time it could be you." Lucas's hands trembled. Fear clawed at him, but was buried under something stronger, determination. He would not be their victim. He would fight. The next days were a blur of movement, from one city to another, Lucas used cash he'd hidden away and forged documents Malik had helped him get. He sought allies, those who had lost too much to the gang, who wanted revenge as badly as he did. Slowly, he built a fragile network of support, but trust was scarce. Each meeting was a risk, every word a test. And all the while, the gang's shadows stretched longer. Lucas remembered his mother's voice. "Promise me you'll come home." He whispered back, "I will, but first I need to end this." As the noose tightened, Lucas prepared for the inevitable. He wasn't just running anymore. He was fighting for every life the gang had touched, and for the chance to break the cycle. Lucas had never expected the knife to come from where he least suspected. Trust was a currency more fragile than glass in his world, and yet he had placed his faith in one person, his childhood friend, Javier. They had grown up together in the same rough neighborhood, sharing dreams of escaping the darkness. Javier was the one who had promised to stand by Lucas when the gang offered their deadly deal. But desperation makes people do unspeakable things. It started with a whispered phone call. Lucas's safe house was no longer safe. The moment Javier's betrayal became clear was a sharp, cold realization. The gang had found Lucas's location through the one person he had trusted above all. That night, the city's heartbeat was offbeat. The usual hum of nightlife was replaced with suffocating silence. Lucas felt eyes on him as he moved cautiously through the dark streets, adrenaline sharpening his senses. He had to disappear, but before he could, the ambush struck. Men emerged from the shadows like ghosts of violence. Masks covered their faces, and weapons gleamed coldly in the moonlight. Lucas barely had time to react. A brutal beatdown followed, a savage punishment for betrayal and refusal alike. His ribs cracked beneath heavy fists, and pain lanced through his skull. Blood tasted bitter in his mouth as he was dragged, battered and broken, to a clearing outside the city limits. There, the gang's message was made clear. Pieces of broken lives littered the ground, grisly reminders of the fate awaiting those who defied the rules. Lucas lay among them, bruised and bleeding, struggling to stay conscious. The cold seeped into his bones, matching the icy despair crawling up his spine. But even in the darkest moments, his mind refused to give in. He remembered his mother's face, the fierce hope in her eyes, the sacrifices she'd made, and the promise he'd made. To survive, to fight, to reclaim his life. Hours passed like endless torture. But then a figure approached, a silhouette moving through the fog. It was Malik, carrying a small medical kit and an unshakable resolve. With care, Malik tended Lucas's wounds, whispering urgent words of comfort. "You're not done yet," he said firmly. "They'll pay for this." Lucas nodded weakly, pain making every breath a battle. His body might have been broken, but his spirit was far from defeated. Recovery was slow and fraught with uncertainty. Every ache and scar was a reminder of the cost of defiance. Yet as he healed, a new fire ignited within him, one not fueled by fear, but by vengeance and justice. Together with Malik, Lucas began gathering information, reconnecting with allies from his past who had also suffered under the gang's iron fist. They worked in the shadows, sharing whispers, decoding secrets, and preparing for the reckoning to come. The betrayal had cut deep, but it also forged a new purpose. No longer was Lucas just a man running for his life. He was becoming a force ready to dismantle the empire that had tried to bury him. But the road ahead was perilous. Every step required caution. Every move was shadowed by danger. And trust, once broken, was not easily mended. Yet, as Lucas stared out at the city skyline from Malik's cramped apartment, he knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just about survival. It was about ending the cycle, about turning the tables on those who believed they were untouchable. The fight was just beginning. The scars on Lucas's body had faded into pale reminders, but the fire in his soul only grew. He no longer ran. Now he hunted. Malik sat across from him in the dim light of their safe house, a run-down loft in the industrial district, hidden behind a fake storefront. Stacks of old newspapers, laptops, burner phones, and photographs were spread out between them. Every red string tied across the corkboard on the wall pointed to one thing: the inner circle of the gang. Lucas had spent weeks gathering intel, not just on the gang's operations, but on its deepest secrets. drug shipments disguised as charity donations, human trafficking through abandoned buildings, bank accounts in the names of dead men, and names, dozens of names. Politicians, police captains, judges, all bought and owned. It wasn't just crime. It was a system, and Lucas was going to break it. Their first strike was quiet. Lucas hacked into a corrupt councilman's email and leaked confidential files to a journalist hungry for the truth. The fallout was instant. Press conferences, resignations, investigations opened. The gang didn't see it coming. Then came the second blow, a video, footage of one of the gang's leaders ordering the execution of a rival. Faces exposed, voices clear. The clip went viral in hours. The city buzzed with rumors, fear, and excitement. For the first time, the gang looked vulnerable. But Lucas wasn't satisfied. He needed to hit the heart. Using an old contact in the Port Authority, Malik uncovered the location of a warehouse believed to be a central hub for the gang's trafficking network. It was there, Lucas decided, the reckoning would begin in full. Wearing a black hoodie and gloves, Lucas entered the compound at 2:13 a.m. armed only with a camera and a flash drive. He documented everything. Boxes filled with cash, crates marked as medical aid, hiding weapons, passport with fake identities. Before he left, he rigged the place with miniature incendiary devices, enough to destroy evidence but not lives. At sunrise, the warehouse exploded. The city shook. News helicopters hovered. Reporters flooded the scene. The gang watched in horror, but it wasn't long before they retaliated. Lucas expected it. He and Malik moved locations every night. A silent war had begun. One fought in alleyways, back doors, and hidden frequencies. Then came the final move. Lucas had discovered the gang's financial linchpin, Victor Drajan, a man who lived behind gates, protected by armed guards and a false image of philanthropy. But Lucas had learned his routines, his patterns, and his weakness, pride. Using a fake identity, Lucas secured an invitation to a high society gala where Drajan would speak. Dressed in a sleek suit, eyes burning with purpose, Lucas moved like a ghost among the powerful. At the peak of the night, just as Drajan prepared to address the audience, Lucas broadcasted a live video onto the ballroom's massive screen. It showed Drajan signing off on violent raids, laughing over deaths, bribing officials. The room froze. Gasps, screams, phones recording. Police burst through the doors. Victor Drajan didn't leave in his limousine. He left in handcuffs. Lucas stood alone on a rooftop as the city lit up below him. Sirens echoed, but for once, they didn't chase him. The system was bleeding. The empire that had tried to kill him was collapsing under its own weight. It wasn't over, not yet, but the reckoning had begun. He had walked away from their deal. They had buried him in pieces. But now, he had buried them in truth. The city looked different now. Where once the streets had pulsed with silent fear, there was now a flicker of cautious hope. Sirens still echoed in the night, but they weren't chasing ghosts anymore. They were pulling corrupt men from mansions, breaking doors open that had stayed shut for decades. The gang's grip had loosened, their leadership fractured, their finances frozen, their alliances crumbling. And yet, Lucas remained in the shadows. He sat in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, wearing a nondescript coat and sunglasses. The television above the counter replayed footage from the arrests. Victor Drajan led away in cuffs, his mansion under federal investigation. Politicians stammering through public apologies. The anchor's voice echoed across the cafe. The anonymous whistleblower who exposed the syndicate remains unidentified. Authorities believe the individual played a crucial role in bringing down one of the largest criminal empires in modern history. Lucas stirred his coffee slowly. He didn't need credit. He needed peace. But peace was elusive. Every scar on his body reminded him of the cost. The people he'd lost. The promises he couldn't keep. The price of walking away had been paid in blood. Not just his, but others. Friends buried. Innocents hurt. His conscience carried their names like tombstones. Malik, now living under a new identity, had urged him to leave the country. Go to Lisbon, he'd said. Or Tokyo. Start over. Lucas tried. He even booked a flight. But when the moment came, he stood at the gate, staring out the window, unable to board. It wasn't guilt that kept him there. It was purpose. Because the system was bleeding, yes, but not dead. There were still men in suits who'd made fortunes on the pain of others. There were still shadows deeper than the one he had escaped. Lucas knew that if he walked away now, someone else would take the gang's place. So he stayed. In the weeks that followed, Lucas began feeding more files to independent journalists. Anonymous drops. Names, photos, money trails. He used what the gang had taught him: how to hide, how to strike, how to dismantle, and turn their own methods against him. And with every headline, every resignation, every confession, he healed a little. One evening, he returned to the old neighborhood. The buildings looked smaller now. The faces had changed. But the corner store still had the same neon sign, flickering like always. He walked a mural on Fifth Street, the one painted in memory of those lost to gang violence. New names had been added since he left. Lucas traced a finger over Malik's brother's name, and then over the blank space at the bottom. He pulled a marker from his pocket and added one more name: Javier. Not out of forgiveness, but out of understanding. Everyone had a choice, and Javier had made his. Lucas just made sure no one else had to make that same choice again. Months later, an envelope arrived at a federal office downtown. No return address. No fingerprints. Inside, a flash drive labeled Last Key. It contained the names of 2 senators, 1 police commissioner, and a European banker, all of whom had ties to the now-defunct gang. It was Lucas's final gift. Back in his apartment, Lucas looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back was not the same one who had once dreamed of escaping poverty through shortcuts. He wasn't a scared kid who'd said no to a deal with the devil. He was something else now. Not a hero, not a martyr, just someone who had survived, and someone who had decided to fight back. He walked out the door, blending into the crowd like a shadow. The city continued on, but it would never be the same, because the man they tried to bury, he didn't just survive. He changed everything.